So hi, thank you so much for being here. Again, my name is Mike Cardus. This is the team performance webinar. We're going to walk through a series of questions and content, and I want to share with you my intent behind this. First off, my intent is to give you content you can use, to give you ideas and tools you can bring back to your teams. I know right now with the pandemic and many of us being stuck at home and having to restructure our teams, this will be helpful content to put into place. So the first thing which would be helpful to all of us is I'd like for you just in the chat box or just take the next minute or so to think about this question on your screen. So the next 30 to 45 minutes, what has to happen in this webinar for this to be seen as valuable to you? So pretend it's an hour or two after the content is done, you come back, what pieces do you want to get? What do you want to learn? What would make the next 30 to 40 minutes useful for you to say this was a good use of your time? So take the next minute or so, type your responses in the chat box, think about your responses, and begin to frame what your intent is or your ideas behind this content today. I'll give you about a minute to work on that. Good. One takeaway, stay news right away, areas to engage remote teams, understanding of team insights, really helpful. Good. Good. So I'm seeing a lot of good stuff here, and I think this is super helpful. We're going to drive through most of these. Also, like I said, there's quite a few folks on the call. We had about 100 that registered. So if I don't get to all your responses, realize I will comment on them or get back to you personally. So to begin with, this is a really common workshop. It's one that I think is important. It's thinking about how can I build a high-performing team? And as you know, inside your context as a team leader or team manager, each team is slightly different, but we know from research and from work with teams what makes teams be effective, how teams can get work done, and we know that there's a pretty consistent formula behind each of the processes. So what are we going to cover? The beginning phrase is this: if you dislike theory and seek practical action, that's unfortunate. Anything you do is founded upon a theory of some sort, and merely eschewing theory means that your decisions and ideas are being misdirected by some bad theory which you don't fully know about. One thing that I find with teams, and is consistent in all my work, it's also one of the areas that I tend to keep myself being very skeptical about, is how do I know what I think I know? Whereas I'm working with a team, what am I seeing? What theories am I applying? And how are these theories framing my perception of the team's work? I want you, as you hear me go through this webinar, to keep thinking about where was your foundational team concepts? Where did they come from? How did you create those? And how do you continue to re-examine your theories and your ideas, test them to see if they're valid or invalid, and also make them more useful? The challenge is that most of the time, our theories and our ideas, we have our heads up our bottom, meaning we're being misinformed by ideas or practices we're not fully aware of. So one common example that I've argued quite a bit about is the use of using generational generalities, or the ideas of saying that certain generations behave certain ways. There's a whole lot of research that shows that while generations are slightly different in how they perceive the context and the environment they're currently in, they are not different people. We need to be thoughtful about the context and the environment, and occasionally find a way to look outside ourselves and find observational tasks to make sure the team is doing work well, and then create a framework or model we can share. Additionally, oftentimes, especially right now, when there's chaos or a team emergency, people are stuck and they're spinning. And we have to stop and take a deep breath and kind of figure out ways to redevelop our process or get things done. My daughter's poking her head inside now, so thank you very much. Hey, can you please go, baby? Right. I love you, sweetheart. I love you, sweetheart. It's a picture of my webinar, okay? I gotta go. You like it? Sorry about that, guys. One of the joys of being at home is that your kids poke their head in the webinar time and time again. So Lily was curious about the picture, and now, like I said, the picture is a way of identifying ways to pull our heads out of our bottoms. So here are a couple of foundational truths that we know about teams. And these truths come from a variety of sources. There's team research that I can share with you, and there's also parts that we've seen. So the first part is teams work better when team members know and have a voice, and they can express their dissent and support openly without concerns for retaliation. Team members must feel they can share their ideas and their feedback. This goes into the part of something called psychological safety, which I'll come to a couple slides forward. Also, teams work better when there's a clear and known purpose for the team to exist. The team members have to know what the purpose is, what the team goals are, why the team is together, and also what this team is supposed to create or develop. You may have some teams you're working with that go on forever and ever and ever and ever and consistently do work. The big challenge is going to be, how do we keep teams going forward and identify what the clear purpose is? Teams work better when each team member knows who is on and off the team. This one seems pretty obvious, but it surprises me and it oftentimes makes me laugh when we go to team meetings or I go to team projects, and many folks aren't even too clear who's on the team, what their role in the team is, or how they fit into the team. Teams work better when each team member knows their own plus the other team member's expected role, accountability, and authority. One thing that I'm clear on is trying to define inside the team structure, what's the accountability and what's the authority of me inside this role. Also, teams work better when there's a competent team manager that can coach, support, and gain resources for the team. I think perhaps this number 5 is the most important concept, meaning that if you as a team leader or you have a team leader, the person must have the sufficient competency, capacity, and skills to get the work done. Nothing is more infuriating than having a team leader or a team manager who is incompetent, who can't get the work done. That will set the entire process back. So in many ways, inside the leadership of teams, you must consistently evaluate and ensure that individuals have the competency to get the work done. So to begin with, let's define team. So a useful definition, a working definition, is teams are 3 or more people working together to accomplish something they could not accomplish on their own. I say this because sometimes we put teams together as committees or action groups or other parts, and the work does not require interdependence. So we'll give you an example. I was working with a university department inside a college, and while they used the word team, as I was working with them, I began to identify that each of the team members had their own programs, their own staff, their own funding streams, and there wasn't very much interdependence between the team members themselves. So I expressed to the program director and the team members, I said, you guys aren't really a team. You are 3 separate lines or systems that work together under a larger department. But if there's no interdependency, if there's no need for you and I to work together, if I can accomplish the goal on my own, pulling a team together for this process is not as useful. You may want to create a committee or a group to get feedback, but ultimately, if you can accomplish a task on your own or somebody else can do it by themselves, you don't need a team for it. Also, team size is important. So research shows that probably 6 plus or minus 2, so 6 to 8, 6 to 4, somewhere inside that gap is a good size for team members. How do we determine if a team is being effective? These 3 areas are the main drivers of team effectiveness that we look at. Number 1 is productive output. So are people producing the outputs for the team? The second part is enhanced capability and interdependence. And the third part of team effectiveness is contribution to personal well-being. Oftentimes when working with teams, we'll develop assessments and ways to evaluate the team leader's effectiveness off these 3 points. Breaking these down a little further. This is the team's productivity. So how well the team's output meets the quality and quantity and time frame of the people who receive and review goals and outputs. You'll also see an awful lot that I use this quality, quantity, time frame as a way to set goals. So within every team, the way you define the goal is saying quality, how good does the endpoint have to be? What's a quality user? What's the quality going to look like? How useful does it have to be? Quantity, that's your how much. So how much of the good stuff do we have to have? And the time frame. The time frame will drive the buy what of the teams. Without a team purpose and without a team what, buy, when, the quality and quantity based upon the time frame, people will become listless. Also, the reality is if I hire you and your team is working to create an output for me, whether it be a product design or increased manufacturing processes, there has to be some sort of feedback that I give you on whether the product was good or bad. The second piece is how the process of doing the work increased and decreased the desire of team members to work together interdependently in the future. It's great if the team accomplishes the task and gets the work done. It's not so great if I never want to work on that team again. It's great if you have a project manager or team leader who can drive people and force them to get things done productively. It's not so great if people are telling you, I never want to work on that team again. A lot of my work with military groups, or doing project management skills and project management workshops, we quickly identify there are some project managers who are really good at driving tasks, who are good at achieving task number one, getting the quality and quantity achieved, but are really horrible people. They're just jerks. And their behavior makes people not want to work with them again. If you are working inside an organization and people are telling you, I do not want to be on a deals team, I do not want to work with Sisha again. When Mike and I work together, I don't feel comfortable. People have to want to work together again. If that's not being part of the process, you're not developing an effective team. And the third part, which I think is also very important, is the amount to which the team members experience or create new growth or well-being as team members. A part of the individual skills of the teams is the people creating new skill sets in project management, teamwork, creativity, all those parts. So when you can coordinate the team's output with the team members' desire to work together again, and the individual's contribution to growth and well-being, then ultimately you're creating a good team. This may be my favorite part. So we're going to walk slightly through what I call bad apples and people who are bad players inside teams. And we know that in every team, you're going to have maladaptive or team members. So when you think about earlier, the second part that I put in there about the individual's desire to work together again, we've all been part of teams where we said, I will be on a team, but if that person is also on the team, I do not want to work with them. So here are some effects of bad apples on the team. A lot of this comes from the research of Bob Sutton from Stanford. Bob Sutton's written several great books. Perhaps his favorite book is one called The No Asshole Rule, which is a really wonderful book about how negative people or assholes affect work and make things bad and make it more challenging. The first part to understand is this, is that on teams, bad is always stronger than good. The challenge is, and we hear it a lot from team members or project managers, Mike, I have person X is not getting the work done and they're making everybody miserable. My response is, can you get that person off the team? Sometimes the feedback is, yeah, Mike, but if I get them off the team, we still have a lot of work to do. My response is that negative person or that bad apple is hurting your team effectiveness because it's slowing down goals, it's impacting folks' desire to work together again, and it's impacting individual skill sets to learn. Plus, it's reflecting poorly on you as a team manager. So the first part is understanding that there's a idea out there or a concept called the good to bad ratio. Is that with bad apples or with team members, there has to be 5 good interactions to 1 bad interaction. And I think right now with virtual teams increasing and the amount of people working at home, us being thoughtful about how many good interactions are we having. The challenge is when you're working face to face and I walk by you at your desk, I can stop in and quickly say to you, hey Jan, that was a good job on the task last week, or hey Clark, good job getting the work done, I appreciate that. If we're meeting virtually, you have to create new systems and processes to give that virtual high fives and the feedback. Also being thoughtful about this. If you and I have a challenging interaction or we have an argument or on the team we have some bad behavior, there has to be offset by 5 good to 1 bad. That will create a positive trust bank and ways for team members to keep working with you through the hard times. Bad apples decrease management effectiveness by about 40%. So think about inside your current work, when you have somebody who's a challenging team member or a bad apple, the amount of time spent by you, by your human resources person, by the other team members, by managers to deal with taking care of that person. When I sit in meetings with executive teams or team projects, and I hear about challenging team members, the majority of the time is eaten up by figuring out what to do about the challenging team member. If you can work out ways to ameliorate that and get that taken care of early, you will free up time. The bad team member is eating up concept time, planning time, development time, all those things. Also, this research comes out of, I think, Google and some of the work from Laszlo Block's book. A bad team member creates just about a negative $3,000 net on the team. That means for every one bad team member you have that's slowing you down, they're eating up about $3,000 in profit per year, plus or minus. A high performer creates about plus 1,200. So if you do the math on that, it means you need 2.5 high-performing team members to compensate for that one bad team member, and then you're just breaking even. So one thing is being thoughtful that if you have a bad team member, what do you do about them? Here's some suggestions. Number one, remove or marginalize the bad apples. A term that I use an awful lot with teams is called deselection. Meaning as a team member or team leader, you have to have the authority and the accountability to choose to the best of your ability who can and cannot be on your team. Now I know sometimes you're stuck or straddled with folks you don't want on the team. You need to figure out a way to get those folks off your team. You have to find ways to marginalize those folks. Second, put all the bad apples on one team. If you can't remove them, don't try to dilute their toxicity by spreading them over several teams. We've all been victim to this. You are a high-performing team member, you're a good team leader. Suddenly they say, you're gonna take so-and-so over there because they're a problem team member. And they put them on your team. It's really hard for you to be effective and get your work done if you know they're giving you all the bad apples. Work on team dynamics, not just getting things done. Slow down, go back to the goals, roles, and procedures, walk through the team performance model. I'm gonna share with you guys in about 10 minutes. And then you'll see ways to consistently give feedback and processes to help ameliorate these team dynamics. Encourage team members to talk to each other, not the person at the head of the table. That's part of team dynamics. Ensure the team, use the team to help you. Send team members out to learn from other organizations. Divide the teams into smaller groups so they can talk to each other. Sometimes if there's a team member that's being challenging, breaking them into smaller teams can be helpful. Prepare quiet people to make contributions. Number 7 we found was very useful. So I was doing some work inside a large government bank organization, and we had inside the bank, we had a lot of hierarchy, a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of folks who were senior team members who were not allowing the junior or new team members to talk. We started emailing out the decisions to be made and some documentation on how to craft the decisions prior to the meeting before. So everybody was asked to fill out a chart. We called it Current Method, Better Way. I'll email that to follow the webinar. And they were asked to think about a challenge or a decision to be made and to complete the Current Method, Better Way matrix prior to the meeting. That was helpful. So what? So I went through these pieces, and now we're going to go into more of the content, and we're going to drive into the model at the end. So this slide here in front of you is pulled from Google. I'm sure many of you have seen it. If you haven't, you can Google Project Aristotle it came from. And they found these 5 things are really important to make team members be effective and get things done. Number 1 was psychological safety. Psychological safety is our team members feel safe to take risks and be vulnerable in front of each other. A team that can have those discussions. So think about the first slide when team members were able to openly discuss dissent and challenges, how they got things done. So psychological safety, I'm going to walk through this quickly. So there's 2 definitions that are most shared. This one here I like the most. Psychological safety is a belief that one person will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, and mistakes. The big challenge is, how do you create psychological safety? it comes back to the model I'm going to share and those parts we shared earlier. Do you know the purpose of your team? Do you fit in on your team? If people speak up and they share ideas, are they fearful of being punished later on? If I'm on your team and I say to you, I think that's a very bad idea, or I don't agree, will I get beat up or punished? Even more importantly, right now, with people working at home and higher stress levels, do I feel safe telling my team leader or my project manager, I can't come through on those areas, I need help with that? So these are 4 major things that are helpful tools that you can start using to make your team members feel more psychologically safe inside their project work. The first part is, what is my role in this team? I know that you're probably serve on very many teams. And slowing down to say, here's the role in this team project, here's the hat you're going to be expected to wear, here's how we define this. Another thing is understanding how much control or influence will I have in this team? Will my ideas be heard? If I ask people to do things, do they have to do it? This is defining the accountability and the authority piece. So if Jack and Mike, I are on a team together, and I ask Jack to do something, does Jack have to do it? Can Jack tell me no? How much influence will I have? Some team members have more influence than others, but being thoughtful about that in the beginning will help begin to craft the team process and how much influence folks will have in the group. Will my goals and needs be met by this team? Every individual, every person, all of you have goals you want to achieve, whether it's recognition, easier work, harder work, promotions. It's saying, how will this team help me with my goals or meet my personal needs that I want to achieve through this team? And the last part is, what will be the level of intimacy inside this team? Now, by intimacy, I don't mean, are we going to hug and kiss each other? What we mean is, what kind of team are we going to be? Are we going to share stuff? Are we going to be the kind of team that shares personal stories and not personal stories? If I can identify these 4 pieces, what's my role in this team? How much control and influence will I have? Will my goals and needs be met? And how much of an intimate team are we going to be? That will help folks create levels of psychological safety to feel more comfortable. Also be mindful. Some people don't feel comfortable sharing as much as other people do. So if you're going to be a team that goes bowling afterwards, or goes out to happy hour afterwards, or spends time on virtual happy hour and check-in meetings, just because somebody doesn't want to do that does not mean they're a bad team member. It just means they're not comfortable with that level of intimacy. This is a nice 2x2 matrix that goes back into psychological safety. And I'm going to slow down here and walk through this a little bit. This comes from the work of Amy Edmondson. Amy Edmondson is currently one of the lead researchers in psychological safety. Wrote a great book called Teaming. And inside here, she breaks this down to give some clarity into what we sort of see. So on this part here, we have psychological safety. So again, that means, do I feel comfortable speaking up, voicing my opinion, telling you I can or cannot do the work without fear of it being used against me later? So high and low. Over here, we have accountability. And accountability is one of those parts that in certain organizations, it's hard to put into place. Also, if you have senior team members, people who have been a part of the organization for a long time, it might be harder to hold them accountable. Accountability low, accountability high. So here, if we have low psychological safety, so I feel afraid and I'm scared and I cannot openly speak up in the meeting, and I have very little accountability, meaning there's not a lot expected from me in the workplace, I'm apathetic, right? I show up, I push the buttons, I keep my mouth shut, I keep my head down, and work gets done. In many large bureaucratic organizations that have multiple layers and are long historic organizations, we see accountability can be low, and safety is also relatively low. The other quadrant we have here is if we have high psychological safety, I feel okay running my mouth, I can tell you that you're wrong, I can express dissent, but also I'm not accountable for a lot of work or outputs. I feel very comfortable, right? So the reality is I know I can openly challenge a group, I can speak up. At the end of the day, there isn't much work I have to do because I'm not being held accountable to tasks and goals. Here is where we have low psychological safety, so I feel afraid to speak up, and I have high accountability. That's where we create anxiety. Now, what I'm currently seeing out there in the field is this. Anxiety is rising. Anxiety is rising because we had the COVID-19 crisis. There was a quick shock to the system. A lot of people pulled together to get team tasks done quickly, and they pulled up into learning because they were working together through high accountability and high structure. And now they're calming down a little bit. So we're seeing the swing back in the other process. And now we're hearing more anxiety. We're hearing greater fear about how am I going to work at home? When are we going back to work? What's it going to look like? So I recommend when you're feeling anxiety and you're hearing anxiety from your team, create a process or a way for them to talk to you and give more feedback. Work to enhance that trust. Work on your empathy. Ask more questions. Gather more feedback. And here in this zone, high psychological safety, high accountability, that's where there's a push, or you're kind of pushing the person into a bit of chaos, but it's balanced, and they're learning new skills. Also, at the same time, with this COVID-19 crisis, we're seeing a lot of organizations learn new stuff. So suddenly they were thrust into being able to have high, quick feedback meetings, quick check-in meetings, high vulnerability, quick ways to give feedback, and now they're doing things differently and new. Now what? Now I'm going to walk through this model with you guys. Anyone who's worked with me in the past, probably 5 years, has seen this team performance model, and I'm a huge fan of it. I use it almost all the time. It's the backbone of my work. I'm going to show you the model, talk through it, and then we'll do some question and answer. So what we see here is this thing called the Drexler Civic Team Performance Model. Perhaps some of you are familiar with it. If not, I'm going to walk through it. In a moment, I'm going to fill in the circles for you also. But what you'll see is this. The model itself, we use the idea of what's called kinetic and potential energy, meaning it follows a bouncing ball. That's the idea. So ball starts here, the ball bounces, and then it goes up. So in a team process or a team project, you're thinking about your teamwork as if it's a bouncing ball. The larger the task, the larger the change, the more energy goes into pushing the ball down to create the outcome or the team success in the back end. On these steps here, this is step 1, this is step 2, this is step 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. On steps 1 through 4, we are creating the team. So at this point, you're pulling the team together, you're clarifying goals, you're building psychological safety, and you're creating ways to understand how we work together. If your team is not currently identified, you are also identifying team members. I'm going to send also an email to the group a document on how to select team members and how to orient team members to your project team early on. The ball goes down. At some point, the ball bounces, and steps 5, 6, and 7 are what we call sustaining performance. The reason I like this model, and I think it's really useful, is it goes beyond just creating the team. It shows how do we, once a team is working, how do we actually sustain effort? And as effort is going forth, what do we look for? The model also has these pieces here, these rectangles that are resolved and unresolved. These are what we call behavioral indicators. These are behaviors you will notice if this step is resolved. If the step is unresolved, you will see negative behaviors. A term we use an awful lot is called check gates. So I was doing some work in the Middle East with oil drilling companies, and we were working with all their team leads on developing psychological safety and creating stronger team performance of the team leads that are on the oil rigs or working with these oil manufacturing organizations. And I shared with them the model. We walked through the model, and one of the gentlemen raised his hand. He goes, Michael. I said, yes, sir. He said, this is just like our oil drilling rigs. I go, in what way? He goes, for every step of oil drilling, we have checkpoints that if we don't qualify the checkpoints, if we see unresolved behaviors, we cannot go forward. We have to fix that part first. And so they found the model to be very useful using their language. Additionally, and you'll see this as I walk through the model with you, on steps 1, 2, 3, and 4, The arrows are reciprocal. They point forwards and backwards, meaning if in step 2, which is developing trust, if folks are showing trust and you see that as a team member, you then go on to step 3. If in step 2, which is developing trust, and you see mistrust, facade, and people behaving not openly, the model says go back to step 1 and fix that. So it creates a checkpoint or a map to help you, the team lead, create shared language. On steps 5, 6, and 7, the arrows are horizontal. They point backwards. That means if you've gotten to step 5, which is implementation, the model says go back and things are unresolved. So step 5, implementation, things are unresolved. You need to go back to this point of the model. Why is that? Because one of my consistent themes is this: work still has to get done. So let's dig into the model. I'm going to share with you the steps and each of the answers, and we can talk about it a little more. So the first step is this: orientation. So in every team project, if you think about my earlier talk about psychological safety and why folks are on the team, we have to orient folks to the team. Orient them to why am I here? Why is this team together? At this point, you're clarifying team purpose. You're clarifying the goals and the objectives of the team as a whole. You're also identifying who is on the team. Oftentimes in the agendas that I share, in our first meeting agendas, I have the team leader write next to each person's name who they are and what they're doing on that team. For example, we may have a niche there from quality improvement. And what is a niche doing there from quality improvement? A niche's job is to check on quality, create graphs and feedback for the team, and to be the voice of quality improvement for our organization. If I can define who's on the team and their purpose for being there, they can then feel more involved in the team. If that's resolved and I know why I'm there and the team members know why they're there, then we'll see purpose, team identity, and membership. Unresolved, we see disorientation, uncertainty, and fear. Within organizations, I say this is why we have new employee orientation. Not to make people sit through hours of webinars and videos, but to orient them to here's how we work, here's what we do, here's who's on the team. Once that part's put in trust, once that part's put in place, then we work on developing trust. Who are you? If you're on the team with me, who else is on the team? What are they doing there? How do they fit in? This is not trust like, I trust you to watch my kids, and you saw my daughter poke her head in earlier. This is trust like, I know why you're on the team, I know why the team's together, and I can trust you to get your work done because in some ways our roles are differentiated a little clearer. If people are showing trust on the team, we'll see mutual regard, forthrightness, and reliability, meaning that psychological safety is coming through. You set the process, we know what's going on, now I can be open with the team. If the trust building is unresolved, people will be cautious, they'll be mistrustful, and they won't be being themselves. If you are seeing people acting mistrustful or they're holding back in the team meeting, talk to them. Re-clarify the team's purpose. Ask them what they're doing there and re-clarify who they are on the team and what they're doing in the project. Next part is goal clarification. Now, many times people want to put goal clarification above orientation and above trust. My response is trust comes from knowing why the team exists, what's the purpose of the team, who are you on the team to me, how do we work together? And then once that part is done, we can put goals into place. For example, if I'm a high-performing team member, you can give me any goals you want. There's a good chance I'll accomplish the tasks. If I don't know, though, why the team is there and who else is on the team, there's a good chance I'll be apathetic about the goals. So if that's resolved, we see explicit assumptions, we have clear integrated goals, and we have a shared vision. Unresolved, we have apathy. So think about that psychological safety quadrant earlier, low psych safety, low accountability. We don't have goals. We have people who are apathetic, they're being skeptical, and we have irrelevant competition. That irrelevant competition happens because there wasn't a clarification of who's doing what and how the work's getting done in the first part, and now I'm overlapping your work. Additionally, there can be historic constructs with the bad apples. So if you have a team member on your team, and I've worked with you in the past, and I've been a bad apple, I haven't gotten the work done, you're gonna have low trust in me to get the work done. So you may choose to overcompensate for my bad appleness or for my lack of team skill by doing more work. That's why you have to clarify who's doing what. This can be done in a project charter, in some Six Sigma groups. It can be done in a document, a project document. You have to write some kind of who's doing what by when document with people's names next to it to accommodate who's doing the work. Once the ball bounces, we hit something called commitment. How we do it. This is the how, the where, the when. This is the more concrete part of the work. At this point, when it's resolved, we have assigned roles, we have resources being allocated, and we have decisions getting made. Unresolved, we have people being dependent and they're being resistant. If you're finding people saying, is this what you want? Is this what you want? That means the goals were not defined too clear enough. The goals were not defined clearly enough in the earlier process. So you have to go back, re-clarify the goals, sit with the person and fix those parts. One more thing about the goals and dependence, this back and forth here also. I also recommend that in your teams, you work with the team member and potentially their team manager to create a time commitment or a time document to how much time can go towards your project. Many of you are probably on multiple teams. Some people, maybe 5 or 6 teams, maybe 10 or 15 teams. You only have so much time per day. If you clearly say, Mike, I want to do your work, but I can only give you 1 hour per week on this project, I have to figure out how do I allocate goals to you that can be accomplished in that 1 hour period that can get the work done. So commitment. At this point, the ball bounces, work starts getting done. When we get to implementation, I say at this point, we had the team meeting, we had the huddle, we had the check-in, now people are getting to work. Or if you're in a virtual team, you create your project documentation, you identified in your project management software who's doing what, you assign tasks, people know the task, you had a check-in meeting, now they're working. Implementation, now work is getting done. If implementation is clear, right, we have clear process, we know what's getting done, we have a backbone or a system for the work, we have alignment, and we have disciplined execution. This is that magic part where work is just getting done, and suddenly you feel really happy. Unresolved though, we have conflict, confusion, no one knows what's going on, we have poor alignment, and we have missed deadlines. So if you've gotten this far in the process and you start missing deadlines, one thing to do is go back to your goals and your goal clarification and identify, are the goals clear? Do we know what they're doing? If people know their goals and know what they're doing, and the work should move forward. If the work does not move forward, then you have to go into a bad apple process and deselect people or work with them through a disciplinary action or coaching action. This triangle of implementation, things fall apart, go back to clarifying goals, recommit, re-implement is a very common triangle, and you're running that loop an awful lot. Trying to get out of that loop is a hard part. Next part is what we call high performance. So this high performance just means that people are doing work without work being expected. This is when suddenly you and your team member are calling each other, hey, I got a great idea for that new project. Things are happening that weren't expected. This is that magical soup synergy moment when suddenly people are working together, new ideas are happening, and the creative flow is just happening. But I tell you, this does not happen by accidents. All those steps before, why am I here? Who's on the team? What are our goals? How are we getting work done? What's implementation look like? That's what drives all these skills. And the slower you are in creating and documenting and creating that psychological safety and those team documents and those ways to help your bad apples become good apples or weed them out or bring the team closer to you in a high trust environment, the more likely you are to get here. If those things are unresolved though in high performance, we'll have overload and disharmony. This also, when I'm working with healthcare clients and nonprofit clients, health and human service clients, this overload and disharmony are incredibly common. And the model says you have to go back to clarifying trusts. Let's use an example. So I'm working with Brianna. Brianna, as a high-performing employee, always comes through for me on the team, always gets the work done, but suddenly Brianna's forced to work at home with her kids and her family, and she drops the ball on the project. Things are not done on time, the goal expectation, things are not achieved. At that point, we have to go back and figure out, A, Did Brianna lose trust in the team? Was her psychological safety not high enough to tell the team, I can't do this? Because it's tough. If you're a high performer and to tell your group, I can't do this work, it's challenging. That means the team may have lost trust in you or you lost trust in the team. The model says go back to clarifying trust. Then you have to reset goals because the work still has to get done. You may have to change your goals, change your time frames, but you redefine the trust, you reset the goals. Do we gotta take Brianna's work and spread it amongst us? Or can somebody else pick up Brianna's task right now to get work done so we can still meet client deadlines as expected? You then recommit, you redo your project plan or your project document, you re-implement, and then you get back to high performance. Part of changing the task and a big part of teamwork is that reciprocity. So if you are a good team member and your team is really good working together, you have a high level of reciprocity. Meaning I know right now if you're having a hard time at home and I fill in for you, there's a strong belief and trust that you'll fill in for me later. Closing the loop, at some point the team project has to stop. So again, with every team project, I recommend you have a close date or a finish date. At this point, we ask ourselves, why continue? Resolve, we have recognition and celebration. Party, thank you. Hence that earlier part on the 5 good to 1 bad. You celebrate the success. You capture what was learned. You do a debrief and a documentation of what was distinctive about this task, what was special. What did we do well? How do we keep the work going on? At this point, the project task, if it's successful, just becomes part of how the work gets done. Unresolved, you have boredom and burnout. If the task or the project team has been together for too long, and people have had enough already, they get bored or burned out. And you'll see that in your team. You'll see the results and you'll see the process here. If you think about this, inside your current meetings, what are those 1 or 2 agenda items that are always there and never make progress? If you are working on a team and you have the authority and the accountability to move team members, if you find folks getting bored or burned out, I highly recommend you get them off the team and bring somebody new. There's an example in an unconventional team process that I did inside a large manufacturing firm where they had all the team leads and the area leads. These were all sort of upper middle management. And they were getting very bored with the safety work. And I said, here's what I want you to do. Leave the meeting, identify somebody else on your team that wants to be here, invite them to the next team meeting. Nobody got in trouble. There was no terminations. We just had to get fresh blood, new ideas in the team meeting because the boredom was hurting the process. And the model itself closes back in a loop on itself. So what you see again is once we hit the why do we continue, at that part we go back to kind of saying, why am I here? Who's on the team? So if you're finding a part here in the process, that's where it works. So in summation, this model is super useful. I'm going to walk through a different quadrant on it here. If you're thinking about it, we also see this is where we look at what we call constraints over freedom. So constraints mean how constrained or how much freedom or creativity does the team have versus freedom to get work done over time of the task. And we'll see that when we're orienting people, creating trust, who's on the team, clarifying goals, the constraint or how much freedom we have gets lesser and tighter. Because at this point, right, we know what the large team project is. Let's say, for example, we have to transition 95% of our staff from office-based to work-at-home based. How do we do that? Why are we in a team? Goal is to transition staff from office to home-based. Who's on the team? Do we have IT? Do we have the people, voice of customers? As we create a project documentation and project charter, we start to define budgets. In the budgetary process, you have clearer goals and expectations. There's not as much freedom. And then the model bounces up a little higher. Then over here, we have more freedom. So at this point, we're creating team performance and we're creating team goals. So with this, I do think that the model itself is super helpful and the content works. And we oftentimes use this model with teams to create the shared language of how work gets done. And when teams get stuck, we'll hang the model up and sort of say, okay, you know the process, you know all the steps, where are you? And if it's a large poster or we write it on the whiteboard, we'll have team members either use sticky dots and they'll stick sticky dots where they think they are, or they'll use Post-it notes. And if we can identify the team currently feels as if it's stuck in goal clarification, so it's feeling apathetic, skeptical, and it's having competition, then the question is, can we rebuild trust in the team? How do we do that? So you can use this as a model or a map to begin to identify where the team currently is, how they're doing, and what the next steps might be. You need to be mindful that as a team lead or as people, we're all super busy, and there's an awful lot going on right now. So with the busyness increasing and the team having a hard time getting things done, you need to create the model or the structure. Within chaos or complexity or more challenging processes, you need to consistently find ways to give the team a chance or a model to lean into. If you can use this model, it'll help. So here's sort of what we call a small framing or observation question. As you're thinking about this, realize that the team model that I shared and all the content earlier is just a way to get your team working together and create structure. And also for you to be able to have something to stand on. Because if you have something to stand on, you have a structure to use to model to move forward. Hence that theoretical underpinning. If you have a strong theory and you have a strong model, you have some way of making sense of where you are, a way to identify the boundaries and constraints inside the work, and a way to concretely put where they are. So we have a small task that I want you to work on for the next bit of time. So for the next 7 to 10 days, be observant of what is happening within your teamwork you would like to see happen more often. This is a solution-focused question we use an awful lot to frame how do people see things, what are they noticing, and how does it work? And also, what pieces of the team performance model did you notice, and how does that make a difference? So in closing, that was a team performance model and the structure and the steps I went through. And I hope it was helpful. I'm going to now stop this recording.